Welcome to Catch Up with Chuck from the Rural Futures Institute at the University of Nebraska. I'm Chuck Schroeder. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute, and today we're going to be talking about the power of mentoring and some very important research behind it. The key to positive rural futures, we believe, is capable, positive rural leaders, and the Rural Futures Institute wants to be in the business of developing and empowering leaders like that to help serve rural America. Joining me today is Dr. Lindsay Hastings. Lindsay is the Clifton Professor of Mentoring Research at the University of Nebraska. She's a faculty member in the Agriculture Leadership, Education, and Communications Department, and she is also the Executive Director of the Nebraska Human Resources Institute, which is a very unique leadership development program here at the University of Nebraska that has yielded really some amazing results. So Lindsay's been a collaborator with the Rural Futures Institute on a couple of our projects, and we think that her research and teaching are particularly relevant to RFI because it supports our fundamental belief that people and people working in community can indeed help determine their own futures. So, Lindsay, welcome.
Thanks.
Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So, listen, you were born in rural Nebraska.
Yes.
But you've had a very interesting pathway to your role in now really developing the next generation of leaders here at the University of Nebraska. Give us a little context about where you come from and how you got here.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Palisade, Nebraska. I'm very proud of my ranching roots there, but grew up in Lincoln, went to high school in Colorado, played a lot of volleyball, showed some quarter horses. Then I went to Texas A&M University to study mechanical engineering. I thought I wanted to design fitness equipment for female athletes, so actually I transferred up to the University of Nebraska to work with Boyd Epley and Husker Power. Through that experience and through my experience with NHRI as a student, I decided I wanted to work with students as a teacher. So I changed my major to math, got a teaching certificate. Then while I was student teaching, I realized that I was more interested in leadership than linear equations. So I decided to start a master's degree program in leadership education. During that time, the associate director for NHRI took a position at Gallup, and so I was offered that position. Then in 2008, the director for NHRI retired, and I took over her position and started a PhD program. And then a husband and 2 kids, 2 horses, a dog, and a partridge in a pear tree later, here we are in 2017.
Well, you have really been an impact player as a faculty member at the University of Nebraska and touched an awful lot of lives. So we're delighted to be having this conversation today. So let's get into that.
Sure.
Let's talk about a couple of things from your research and teaching portfolio that we think are especially relevant to the Rural Futures Institute. First, your research in mentoring and generativity, a term that may be a little bit foreign to some of our audience, but those things have had you presenting to audiences ranging from the American Farm Bureau Federation at their annual convention. You've done TED Talks. You were recently lecturing at the International Leadership Association in Brussels, Belgium. What is it about your work that is appealing to such a broad variety of audiences?
Great question. Well, generativity sounds like a made-up word, but I assure you it's not. It refers to the care and concern one has for establishing and guiding the next generation. What's interesting about generativity is that it's largely been considered a midlife construct. So what that means is that decades of research have indicated that people tend to peak in their ability to be generative when they're middle-aged. Young adults are not regarded as being highly generative. Now, in some respects, this makes sense. When we're middle-aged, we're coaching Little League, we're on the PTA, we're doing a lot of generative things.
Sure.
Young adults are regarded as being more altruistic than generative. Young adults are more likely to do the one-time act of service than necessarily spending years building something in a generative capacity. What's interesting about generativity, though, is that it's the strongest predictor of social responsibility, and this emerged out of Alice Rossi's work in 2001 with her comprehensive midlife study. Now, so what that means is that the more a person cares about establishing and guiding the next generation, the more likely they are to spend their time and money building a strong family, a strong workplace, and a strong community. Okay, so why does this matter, especially to rural communities? Well, the United States is poised to experience its largest transfers of wealth and leadership in its history. Between now and 2060,
We always talk about wealth. We sometimes forget about leadership.
Yeah. So between now and 2060, we'll transfer 75 trillion expected from older generations to younger generations. What's interesting is that this is not just a wealth issue. Right now, over 56% of management occupations are currently being held by individuals age 45 and older. So what that means is we will not only transfer 75 trillion, we will also transfer over half of all management occupations. So what that means is we can't afford to wait for young adults to become middle-aged before socially responsible leadership will be demanded of them. They will be taking on senior leadership roles earlier, so we need to know what develops generativity and therefore social responsibility earlier. We studied that with our NHRI students. We looked to see, okay, college student leaders who mentor, are they more generative than their peers? And the results of our research indicated that indeed, college student leaders who mentor are more generative than general college students and therefore more likely to be socially responsible. So what does this mean for rural communities? If we know mentoring has something to do with generativity, which has something to do with social responsibility, I think as rural communities author a strategy for developing their next generation of leaders, I think mentoring needs to be a key component of that strategy.
Makes perfect sense, and we know that young adults, we hear in various surveys, are looking for communities where they can come build a business, build their family in a place where they can make a difference. And what you're saying is that your data says they can make a difference.
Yep.
If they're well prepared and come to that community saying, hey, this is part of who I am in building that community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, let's also get into your real world, one-on-one capacity building work with the Nebraska Human Resources Institute.
Sure.
Very unique leadership development program, and you're not just teaching them how to conduct a meeting or how to command a brigade. You really are helping develop young people who will maximize not only their own potential based upon their strengths, but help others to do likewise. So give us a little history of NHRI and then what you're doing today to build this generation of leaders through that work.
Sure. NHRI is about 70 years old. It was started by positive psychology fathers, Dr. William Hall and Dr. Donald Clifton. We are the only strengths-based leadership mentoring program of our kind in the country. What we do is we identify and select outstanding college student leaders, and then we pair them in one-to-one relationships with outstanding K-12 student leaders. The intent.
So you're making the best they can be.
Yep.
This is not necessarily trying to lift all boats, if you will, but you are really focused on those with that high talent.
Right, and the idea being is that these K-12 student leaders, right now they're making a difference, but perhaps they're doing it haphazardly. And the idea behind this mentoring relationship is to help them recognize their talents as a leader and deliberately use those talents every day. So the college student's job in this relationship is to build what we call an investment relationship. Our college students are selected as second semester freshmen, and then they'll work with the same K-12 student for 3 years. And this college student is there to build an investment relationship. And Dr. Hall and Dr. Clifton were very deliberate about calling these relationships investment relationships. My favorite quote from Dr. Hall, he said, "Concern for others, no matter how sincere, does not by itself guarantee favorable development." So what he was saying was caring about other people, that's cool, but it's not enough. If you really want to make a difference in the life of someone else, it needs to reflect an investment. So our college students are there to build an investment relationship with this K-12 student, and they have 2 jobs. The first part of their job is to take inventory of their mentee's talent as a leader, to try and understand what is it about them that makes them a leader. What is their unique brand of influence?
And there's good research to say here are those talents, and here's how we identify them.
Yep.
This isn't guesswork and sort of free forming. There's research behind it.
Absolutely. It really draws from Hall and Clifton's early research in positive psychology, and that they studied students who had high talent for positive influence, and they identified several themes of talents related to what we call human relations capital, the ability to positively influence the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of others. So the first part of the college student's job is to inventory their mentee's talents as a a leader. Second part of the college student's job is to create what we call stimulus situations, or intentional opportunities for their mentee to deliberately use their talents to make a difference. So for example, if you and I are working together and I recognize that you have high rapport drive or you relate well to others, a stimulus situation might be, I might say, okay, Chuck, this week in school, I want you to call 5 people by name in the hallway, and with 5 others, just say hello. And let's see the difference in response you get when you call someone by name. It's likely the following week, when I ask you about it, it's likely that you'll tell me, yeah, it made a difference when I called someone by name. We talked in the hallway, whereas when I just said hello, we were like ships passing in the night, right?
Sure.
My job as the college student is to connect the dots, to say you have high talent as a relator, right? High talent and rapport drive. And when you use that talent to deliberately call someone by name, in that second, you're saying to that person, I care about you enough to call you by name, and that makes a difference. The idea is that by helping you draw that connection between your talent and how you can use that talent to make a difference, the idea is that the hope is that you'll go down the hallways the next week calling people by name, not because I've challenged you to, because you recognize it and you're going out of your way to
You're
use that
being
talent.
rewarded.
Mm-hmm. So the idea is to turn the investee into an investor, prepare these K-12 student leaders to use their talents every day to make a positive difference.
Fascinating. The results over those 70 years have really been phenomenal. And so what I know about your NHRI students is that while they're not all rural kids, you do have a significant number of them that come from rural communities. Talk a little bit about the profile and ambitions that you see in these young potential rural leaders.
Mm-hmm. What's great about NHRI is we work with about 180 college student leaders and 180 K-12 student leaders. And our college student leaders represent all colleges here at the university. So NHRI provides this wonderful intersection between urban student leaders and rural student leaders. What's great is that regardless of background, we bring together students who have this passion and capacity for positive difference making, and they get to spend 3 years in a laboratory for learning how to build investment relationships. What I love about rural students in particular who are in NHRI is to see their passion and fire for using their NHRI lab experience to go create those kinds of investment relationships in their community and to use that as a vehicle by which they'll make a difference for their community. I've really enjoyed watching their passion evolve and emerge through that idea.
So let's talk a little bit about community.
Mm-hmm.
Based on your work as well as your association with Dr. Tom Field with the Engler program, who was our guest last week on Catch Up with Chuck, your relationship with the Heartland Center for Leadership Development, where actually you did an internship earlier in your career, and others. You were one of the founders of what has now become a very successful Rural Futures Institute program, our Rural Serviceship program. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you hoped to accomplish when the serviceship program was just a big idea, and then what you've seen evolve over the last 5 years as we've now been in 19 communities with 38 of our students.
The whole intent and purpose behind serviceship was to give students an opportunity to be an intern for a community rather than a company, and to give students a real life opportunity to work alongside community leaders to author real change in a rural community. So for me, what's been so fun over 5 years is to watch students recognize that no matter what they do, whether they become a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO, no matter what they do professionally, their job is to build communities. So to me, this has been a real life opportunity for them to understand their role in building community.
And by the way, they can do that in Chicago as well as in COZAD. And
Absolutely.
It's been really fun to see those students come through that experience and really come out with a life-changing notion of their responsibility in community. Well, listen, Lindsay, you're a great example of the distinguished scholars at the University of Nebraska who are committed to using their sophisticated research and teaching endeavors to have a real-world impact on the ground with people and communities in rural Nebraska and other places around the world. We at the Rural Futures Institute are just proud to be associated with you in your work and perhaps helping to make that connection from the academy to community for your work to be most effective. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, the pride goes both ways, and that Chuck is also my dad. And Dad, what's been so fun growing up with you is that you always encouraged me to ask questions, and you always found value in every question I asked. Additionally, you always said my dinner table should be a place where politics and religion are discussed openly. And what I took from that is that any topic should be able to be discussed at our dinner table engagingly as well as with civility. And I see that same spirit here at the Rural Futures Institute. I see the Rural Futures Institute as one big dinner table that brings together scholars, community development practitioners, and community leaders to ask bold questions and to come together to have a lively, engaging conversation, as well as to apply scientific inquiry to find answers to those questions. So thanks to you and your leadership, as well as the RFI staff, for creating one great dinner table for us to ask bold questions about rural community thriving.
Needless to say, I'm pretty proud of your work, because it is making a difference. Well, listen, I want you to stay in touch with the Rural Futures Institute through Facebook and Twitter, as well as our revamped website that is attracting a lot of attention. We're going to be back soon with another edition of Catch Up with Chuck, where we're going to be looking at rural people, rural places, success stories, innovators, entrepreneurs, all kinds of folks who are helping to make rural communities a legitimate best choice for worthwhile living. Thanks for being with us.